Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
I had no idea what I was getting into when I first moved into that condo. It was a quiet little community, tucked along a small street near a golf course, and it seemed peaceful enough. The entry to the HOA was smack in the middle of the street, dividing the neighborhood into two distinct halves. Most of us lived on the eastern side, but all 5 board members, coincidentally, lived on the western side. When I first saw the place, I noticed the western half looked a bit more polished, but I foolishly chalked it up to the people there being more enthusiastic about decorating. I remember the first time I saw my soon-to-be home. The sun was shining, and everything looked perfect. The lawns on the western side were pristine, dotted with blooming flowers, neatly trimmed hedges, and the kind of trees you'd see in a magazine. The eastern side, where I was about to stake my claim, wasn't exactly shabby, but it lacked the flair of the other half. It didn't bother me at first. I just assumed that people on the eastern side didn't care much for gardening. I liked the condo, and the $250 a month HOA fee seemed reasonable, especially since it covered water and the upkeep of roofs, exteriors, and landscaping. So, I signed the papers and moved in, blissfully ignorant of the nightmare that was about to unfold. At first, everything was fine. I got settled in, met a few neighbors, and began to notice just how different the two sides of the street really were. The more I looked, the more I realized just how much better the western side was maintained. It wasn't just the landscaping. The entire atmosphere felt different. The grass was greener, the flowers more vibrant, and even the pavement seemed to be in better condition. Meanwhile, on our side, moss crept along the sidewalks, and the few sad bushes we had were barely hanging on. It didn't take long before I started hearing whispers from other residents about how the HOA was spending our money. Apparently, the fees had been steadily rising over the years, but not much had changed on our side. By the time I moved in, the fees had already climbed to $250 a month, but within a couple of years, they had nearly doubled to $450 a month, with another increase on the horizon. The official reason? Rising costs and a long-term beautification project. The problem was, the only part of the street being beautified was the side where the board members lived. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Every time I walked down the street, it felt like a slap in the face. The western side was practically a botanical garden, with new trees, colorful flowers, and even some fancy statues. Our side, on the other hand, got the occasional azalea bush planted in the most half-hearted way possible. It was like the HOA was rubbing it in our faces. The frustration grew every day, so I decided to attend one of the HOA meetings to voice my concerns. Walking into that first meeting, I was naive. I thought maybe it was all just an oversight, that if I pointed it out, they'd realize their mistake and start treating everyone equally. Boy, was I wrong? I raised my hand, trying to stay calm, and asked why all the improvements were only happening on the western side. The president of the HOA, this smug, self-satisfied guy who I later learned was pretty tight with the rest of the board, gave me a condescending smile and told me, "Things just haven't gotten to your end yet." I should have known right then that it was all a load of crap, but I wanted to believe them. So, I waited. Weeks turned into months, and nothing changed. If anything, things got worse. Our side was practically decaying while the western side kept getting more and more elaborate decorations. They even installed these ridiculous light fixtures that made their side look like some kind of luxury resort at night. I was beyond fed up, so I decided to attend another meeting, hoping to press the issue further. That second meeting was a turning point. The moment I walked in, I could feel the hostility. The board members barely acknowledged me, and when I brought up my concerns again, their responses were short and dismissive. They didn't even try to hide their annoyance. I was being put in my place, and I realized I'd made their infamous shit list. It wasn't long after that meeting that the petty harassment started. I'd come home to find notes taped to my door, warning me that I wasn't in compliance with some obscure rule or other. One time, they even tried to fine me for having a garden gnome that they claimed was unsightly. Meanwhile, the western side had gnomes, wind chimes, and even a giant flamingo statue. But of course, those were perfectly acceptable. It was clear that they were targeting me because I had dared to question their authority. It was infuriating, but what could I do? It was like they held all the power, and I was just stuck in their game. Things escalated when a golfer, who clearly had no business on a course, sliced a ball so badly that it shattered my back door window. I reported it to the HOA, thinking they'd help since the HOA was responsible for exterior damages. Instead, I got a call from the HOA's insurance rep, who accused me of trying to scam them into paying for a replacement windshield on my car. I was speechless. What kind of twisted logic was that? I had to spend hours explaining that it was my back door window that had been shattered, not my car windshield. They finally agreed to cover the repair, but not without making it clear that they thought I was trying to pull a fast one on them. It was insulting, and it felt like they were just looking for any excuse to make my life miserable. But the final straw, the thing that pushed me to my breaking point, was the roof. It was supposed to be covered by the HOA, but of course, things didn't go that smoothly. One morning, I woke up to the sound of water dripping in my bedroom. At first, I thought it was just a leak from the rain, but when I got up and saw the steady stream of water pouring through my ceiling, I knew it was bad. I called the HOA in a panic, expecting them to handle it quickly. Instead, I got the runaround. Days turned into weeks, and the water damage got worse. My ceiling was practically caving in, and I had to move my bed to avoid getting dripped on while I slept. I couldn't believe it was happening. When I finally got someone from the HOA to come out and look at the damage, they tried to tell me that it wasn't their responsibility. Apparently, the repair contract had gone to the president's son-in-law, who had done a half-assed job on the roof. And now they were trying to weasel out of paying for the repairs. I was livid. The walls of my condo seemed to close in on me, suffocating me with the oppressive weight of the homeowners association's endless demands. Every morning, I awoke to a fresh list of petty grievances and absurd rules that seemed designed solely to make my life miserable. The final straw came when they fined me for having a welcome mat that was, according to them, too colorful. My frustration boiled over, and in a fit of defiance, I decided I couldn't stand living in that place for another minute. With a sense of urgency that bordered on desperation, I put my condo on the market, determined to escape the clutches of those tyrannical overlords. The process was grueling. Potential buyers traipsed through my home, scrutinizing every corner, while the HOA continued their relentless barrage of nitpicking. It felt like a never-ending battle, with me caught in the crossfire. Months dragged on, each day a reminder of my entrapment. But finally, a glimmer of hope appeared, a buyer willing to overlook the HOA's stranglehold. I sold the condo at a loss, but at that point, I didn't care. The financial hit was a small price to pay for freedom. The day I handed over the keys felt like liberation. I drove away, leaving behind the suffocating rules and regulations, the constant surveillance, and the endless meetings that felt more like tribunals. I've been living HOA-free for almost a decade now, and I can't tell you how much better my life is without those petty tyrants breathing down my neck. The air feels lighter, the sun shines brighter, and I finally have the peace and autonomy I crave. Looking back, it feels like some kind of twisted nightmare. The way the board members treated the rest of us, especially those of us on the eastern side, was nothing short of cruel. They used their positions of power to make their lives more comfortable at the expense of everyone else. And the worst part, they didn't even try to hide it. It was all done out in the open, as if daring anyone to call them out. The whole experience left me with a deep distrust of HOAs and the people who run them. I'll never make that mistake again. For apartment buildings, having a management entity makes sense because there are shared responsibilities and resources that need oversight. External repairs, like fixing the roof or maintaining common areas, require coordination and collective funding. Additionally, water usage is often not individually metered in apartments, so a central management system is necessary to handle these logistics fairly and efficiently. However, when it comes to standalone houses, the need for such oversight seems less beneficial. Homeowners typically have the autonomy to manage their own repairs and utilities, making external management less relevant. Instead of facilitating convenience, these associations often impose additional restrictions on what homeowners can do with their own property. These rules are usually crafted by individuals who are not directly impacted by them, leading to unnecessary constraints on personal freedom and creativity. Homeowners may find themselves entangled in bureaucratic red tape, unable to make changes or improvements without seeking approval. This can stifle individuality and result in frustration, as people are forced to adhere to guidelines that don't necessarily align with their personal preferences or needs. Maintaining common areas and amenities, for example, a pool, gym, or walking path. They are great for making sure everyone pays their fair share to maintain the shared common grounds. They also give you leverage against a neighbor who turns their front yard in a pig farm or parks 16 cars along the street. Obviously, these are extreme examples, but HOA do serve a purpose when not run by micromanagers. HOAs are the worst. They pretend to be all about community and maintaining standards, but in reality, they're just a bunch of busybodies with nothing better to do than impose their arbitrary rules on everyone else. I can't believe they fined you over a welcome mat. It sounds like they're more interested in controlling every aspect of your life than actually helping the community. It's like living in a neighborhood run by a bunch of nosy neighbors who think they know better than you. I'm glad you managed to get out, even if it meant taking a financial hit. Freedom is priceless. If you like our stories, then please like and subscribe and comment, and remember to hit that bell icon so you never miss out. We have new stories almost every day.
HOA converting to over 55, considering banning our kids from all common areas including our front and back lawn. Our 16-unit condo association is considering converting to an over 55 community and restricting our kids' access to anything outside our home. 20 years ago, when I was 18, and immediately following my father's divorce and suicide, my mother moved my brother, 16, and me into a condo in a small 16-unit condominium complex in Northeast Ohio from our previous 2-story home near Columbus. Our neighbors were about half retirees, half middle-aged single adults in their late 30s and 40s, and 1 or 2 families with 1 or 2 minor children. We both attended high school and college in the area, and I lived there, at least while not living on campus or out of state, until I got married at 28. My wife and I rented an apartment from a large 100-unit apartment complex directly across the street from our small condo complex. So we continued to visit the condo, either to host larger parties, work out of the larger garage if necessary, or spend time with family. 5 years ago, my wife and I started having kids, of which we now have 3, ranging from 1 month old to 5 years old. After the second kid, our small apartment was getting cramped, and my mother was getting remarried, so we decided to buy the condo from her last year. Not only was it more affordable because it was a condo, but I've lived here since I was a kid, and I've personally handled nearly all of the tens of thousands in maintenance costs over the years due to my work as a contractor, so it's already been modified to our preferences. A few months after my mother moved out, we got notice that the board of our 16-unit HOA received a request to convert to an over 55 community, and that they were running it by their attorney. I had never heard of this before, but it appears that it's legal to convert if at least 80% of the units have a resident over age 55. With some basic online sleuthing, I was able to determine that due to the younger 30 and 40-something owners moving out or selling over the last 5-10 years, we are now the only unit out of 16 with owners under age 55. My wife and I both turn 40 next year. We believe the board here was waiting to enact this change, as 3 of the owners are exactly 55, and they would need to have waited for them to cross the 55-year-old threshold in order to move ahead with qualifying for this. Despite the owners' ages, 2 owners presently have children. One has a 24-year-old adult daughter, and one has a 10-year-old minor kid. At least 3-4 owners are in their 80s and 90s. Anyway, long story short, we received a second notice that they meet all the legal requirements and the HUD survey, and are going to go ahead and vote on this change. They won't tell us who initiated this change or even why, instead telling us that we can submit our concerns in writing, and the HOA attorney will reply. No owners' meeting will be held, only a board vote, and all board members are 60-80 years old with no kids. Since we're the only owners under 55, we believe it is almost certain to pass. We filed a long list of concerns with the board, including our view that even if we're allowed to remain living here, it will noticeably reduce the property and resale value. Our kids may not be allowed to host birthday parties or have friends over anymore. And most importantly, they may not be allowed to play in the front or backyards or anywhere outside our walls, which are all technically common areas. The yards here are unpartitioned and stretch for roughly 100 yards, undivided behind and in front of the units. My brother and I must have played in these yards with our friends thousands of times over the years. Unfortunately, as the years have gone by and our neighbors have moved out and been replaced by older residents, we've gradually received more complaints about noise, parking, And most recently, our new 58-year-old neighbor this summer came running out of her house screaming at us and our kids because she said they had touched her flowers, and if they did it again she was going to beat their ass. That being said, I believe in all honesty that we are, as a whole, generally quieter and more well-behaved than the average family of 5. My kids keep to themselves and mostly stay directly behind or in front of our own unit, with minimal screaming. We both work from home and have monitored them all day at times to verify this. Would it be legal to restrict our children's use of the yard in such a way? At this point, I feel we have no choice but to hire an attorney, but from my past few weeks of online research, it actually appears that this is a legal form of age discrimination, even if we lived here prior to the over 55 conversion. As a gambit end run around this potential outcome, I deeded all of my children fractional shares in the condo so that they are now owners and property owners. But I fear the designation of all outside space as common areas places this out of my control, and we're going to be at the mercy of a handful of grumpy old people who are perhaps tired of seeing and hearing our kids. Does anyone have any experience with anything like this? I mean, I could totally understand if the community started as a retirement community, but to have the rug swept out from under our feet like this with our childhood home feels terrible. It's exceptionally difficult to find any examples online of existing communities that have converted and then restricted families. Almost every post I've come across involves moving into an over 55 community. Edited. Also wanted to mention that our condo association is situated in the middle of a much larger subdevelopment with several hundred full-sized homes, of which hundreds have children. We're directly across from a 100-unit apartment complex with no age restrictions and many kids. The entire other half of our street is duplex townhomes with kids in nearly every single one. Our condo association is just this tiny carve-out with its own HOA in the middle of several square miles of homes. I lived in a HOA that someone tried this. Luckily it got voted down. The older folks didn't want the kids enjoying anything. Nothing was getting damaged, they just didn't want kids using things they never used. And people that voted for it didn't live nearby the stuff the kids are using, just drove by it and decided kids are a nuisance. The town it was in was notorious for old people trying to push budgets that took everything away from the kids, younger families and schools because they no longer had children in them and didn't need the services. There was a referendum, or whatever it was called, for new equipment at the park. It had really no impact on taxes, but the elderly started a campaign to try to get it removed entirely because their taxes shouldn't go towards it. I recently got to see this in action. I was up in the mountains yesterday with a buddy enjoying a spirited drive. We came upon a work truck turned over upside down in a ditch. We were the third or fourth person on scene. Driver was okay, but shaken up. This was on a very nasty set of blind corners. After making sure he was okay, my buddy and I drove a couple of corners ahead to tell people to slow down and to warn them of what's ahead. Most people would give us the thumbs up or open their window to ask what's up, but the boomers, 99% of them drove by with the biggest scowls on their faces, mugging us with their lead-based stares like we were asking them for money or some shit. Luckily, emergency services showed up after a bit, and we carried on our drive. The look of utter contempt on their faces was burned into my mind. I'm in my 30s, and last time I went to vote, the boomers were talking about a referendum that would give teachers a raise, and another one that would allow the city to redo all the parks. The boomers around me at least were all in agreement about how teachers don't need a raise, and how they should be teachers because they love the job, not for the pay. They were also saying the parks were perfectly fine. The teacher raises passed with something like 53% approval, and the parks passed with like 55%. 2 years later and parks are absolutely beautiful. I didn't know they would revamp all of them. They added splash parks, shaded equipment, ADA-friendly equipment, etc. My toddler and I love them, and so do all the parents. I just think about the miserable boomers driving past and hating F them.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.